earlier, but let's reiterate the main target markets of ThinkPad P16s and ThinkStation P360 Ultra. Who are the users that are perfect for these two powerful devices? Mr. Harveen?
Thank you, Jamie. So if I were to drill down to the Philippines market, for example, right? I think the AEC market is fairly large in the Philippines. It's been growing since for a long time. Since I've been traveling there a lot in the past, meeting some of the customers in Makati, and how Makati has grown in the last 15, 20 years. It's all because of AEC, and how they use those apps. Uh, I know MicroStation is big as well. ArchiCAD is big in the Philippines, and now Revit's getting big as well. So that's one market which we cater for specifically to the Philippines market, right? The other will be education as well. So not necessarily public education, but also private education. So smaller schools, design houses, countries like Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand have a lot of media schools, right? Design schools, and a lot of good productions come out from these countries, right? So that's another area I would specifically mention for the Philippines market as well, where you got architecture, you got media, and education as well, right? Uh, so these would be the big markets. Generally, we're focusing for the Philippines market specifically. Other markets, if you look at it, if you go to countries like for example, rest of Southeast Asia, right? You have manufacturing, which is fairly large in Korea. All right, so that's another area the P360 would help in. The big companies there, for example, those like the big five, you got Samsung, Hyundai, HHI, those big manufacturing shipbuilding cities, they would really benefit from the P360 Ultra because of the workload they require, and for them, power is a key concern, and so is space in Korea. So that's an example of some of the markets where these two products will be catered to.
Thank you so much
Yeah.
for sharing that, Mr. Harveen, which is precisely why I want to get my hands on the P16s. I keep saying that. Don't worry, Mr. Edward. I'll order. I'll order
Yes.
as soon as I can in the Philippines. Then, speaking of Mr. Edward here, who is so kind to join us for the Q&A segment as well, you had a very interesting speech when you opened up the session today, and you kept repeating the tagline that I love so much when it comes to Lenovo, which is smarter technology for all. Let's face it, there are so many competitors out there, but let's drill that down. What or how are your products compared to its competitors, and how do you encourage users of competitor products to switch to Lenovo?
Right. So if you look at the build, no, I'm talking about the laptop itself. The 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 product itself is called ThinkPad. So we are coming from the I would say number one product of Lenovo today, which is a ThinkPad, which is commercially used by most of the customers mentioned by Harvin a while ago. So with that, you're getting the same features. I think what differs us is really the features that we have. For example, the shutters, the look and feel of the product, the initial the I would say the small features that probably some other competitors doesn't have, and of course security, which is very important, no, which is basically overarching the other ThinkPad line of products. That's for the laptop. On the desktop, I think Harbin has already mentioned it's very ultra small, but yet it packs a punch, no? Because you can expand it, no? And I think what also good thing here is, if for example you're an OEM manufacturer, maybe not much in the Philippines, but maybe for example the likes of a healthcare type of product. I don't know if I can mention it, but some of them actually buys our workstation to be part of their whole OEM solution. And the reason for that is we have, in terms of life cycle, this has like, I'm talking about the P360, has a 5-year life cycle. Meaning, by the word itself, you can really get it, if you buy it today, you can use it until the next 5 years because of the expansion, the expandability, and of course the dual motherboard, which is I think first in the market today. So I think really it is more on the features that not only inherent to the ThinkPad brand, but also now we're bringing that to the workstation part of our offering, actually, Jamie.
It is so clear, Mr. Edward, that Lenovo really is a different level when it comes to the features. And you said it yourself when you started the session as well. You continue to think of the users. And as the needs of the users evolve, you think of that as well and continue to innovate to be able to deliver the needs that they have for this new hybrid work setup. Now, I believe we have several questions here. By the way, I also want to make mention of experts who are with us during the session. They haven't been on the screen yet, but I want to acknowledge we have 4P Manager of SMB, Mr. Ferdy Fetros, and Inside Sales Manager of Central Asia Pacific, Raymond Ingal, who will be answering technical questions. So please don't be shy to ask questions, guys. I love that you're already sending some in the chat room. Continue to do that. We want to hear from you. Again, this is really for you. We have Julian of Utterly Techie here. And the question is, can we stack two ThinkStation P360 Ultra devices on top of each other? Would it be useful to save even more space on the desk? So who would like to take this question?
Can I answer that? Technically,
Sure.
you can, right? You have an option to do that because you have two LAN connectivity, 2.5 connectivity that you can stack up. But depending on the application that you're going to run on the machine, right? It would be much more advisable if we could do a size down first, okay, in order for us to recommend the proper machine, okay, instead of having stacking up different model.
Okay. All right, got that. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Raymond, once again, and for answering that question. Now, we have a follow-up question from Julian here, maybe for in-person collaboration for the industries needed. Is this a possibility? Sir Raymond, are you taking that question?
Wait.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say maybe for in-person collaboration for the industries needed. I'm trying to understand that question. Does it? Maybe for in-person collaboration. Can I clarify?
I think I see here Julian is commenting in the chat box saying that was to answer Sir Harveen's question in the chat. So okay, it is referring to your answer in the chat, Boss Harveen. So he's saying maybe for in-person collaboration for the industries needed.
Yeah, so for I'm trying to decipher what that is, right? So Julian, if you could just clarify what you mean by that, I would be able to answer your question with a lot more accuracy. All right. Well, I mean, one scenario I can think of where you want to stack it up is, like I said earlier, right? If you want to use it to have, for example, digital signages, right, like 16 displays or even 24 displays, right, then you could stack them up to give you that option, right? That's one way I can think of. The other option would be if you want to probably, like what Raymond said, right, link them up, right, which would be possible. But it would depend on the app, right, on whether the app supports that as well. So it's it can be done, in short. It would depend on what scenario you want to use it in, right? If it's for an expandability of displays, yes, all right, I think that's pretty good. If it's for something more complex, it would depend on the user and the solution scenario, all right? Yes, okay. Over back to you, Jamie. Hope that answered the question.
I think it did. I can see here that Julian is saying that answer is good, and he thanks you for taking that on. Thank you once again, Mr. Harveen, and Mr. Raymond as well for chiming in. Again, please feel free to ask away. We have our experts here who are ready to take your questions, and even our technical experts who talk about the nitty-gritty details of these two powerful machines. We have Ron here who has a question. I wonder if the Philippine version of Lenovo ThinkPad P16s will also have an optional nano SIM slot.
So let me take that. So it depends on the version that's purchased and launched. I'll have to come back to you on the specific version for the Philippines. But there are two optional ports. One is a smart reader, and the other one is a nano SIM card slot for the WLAN supported models. So in short, globally, we have the support. For the Philippines market specifically, I think we'll come back to you on that.
Let me answer that. For
Yep.
Philippine, it's confirmed that it's not going to be a feature because of the NTC certification and
Okay.
regulation.
Right.
Right, it's
Thank
a
you.
government restriction.
Okay. Okay. We have another question here. Really great questions coming our way for us to fully understand the features and how it applies to us, especially in the Philippine market. We have Philip of Good Guy Gadgets here, who is asking, what are the I/O ports available on the ThinkPad P16?
So I/O ports, you have two USB port side by side. Then you have two USB Type C and one HDMI. All right, I'm using the same machine actually right now.
Wow.
So I'm using the older version, the previous version, P15s Gen 2. It's very similar except for the screen dimension.
Okay. And of course, P16 is more powerful compared to the one you're using now, right, Raymond?
Yes, compared to
Okay.
the processor and speed, it's much more faster.
Continuously elevating. We have Ray of Was Up here who's asking, I was going over the specs presented earlier on the ThinkPad P16s and I saw that it has 65 WH battery. I was just wondering how long would that usually last with heavy use? Because you mentioned a lot of apps earlier as well, Harveen, that can be used with this device rather. So he's asking how long would that battery last with heavy use of the device?
So this is a question which we've been getting for years, okay, not just us, but everyone out there, right? And it varies significantly depending on the app you're using, right? If you're using entry-level app, right, that isn't too heavy on your graphics, it depends on the specs that you select as well, right? I mean, the battery is fixed, but the components can change, right? So I'm going to use applications as a guidance for this, right? Because applications kind of decide what your spec should be. So if you're running something very high end, like Maya, for example, probably I would say 2 hours plus, 3. Okay, I would say, or an estimate, depending. And if you're running Maya, it depends whether you're running high end rendering or low end rendering. I mean, if you're in Lucas, probably extremely complex, right? Very heavy. If you're in a smaller organization, probably a lot lighter and longer. If you're running entry manufacturing apps like SolidWorks, Autodesk, or even AutoCAD, for example, you probably get, I would say, an average 3-4 hours on the machine, right? Raymond, just jump in if my numbers are need to be changed. Yeah, right. Yeah.
But if you're just going to use this regularly on an office use setup like Word, Excel, email, mine it lasted for 8 hours. Okay, so in full battery day,
8 hours, one full day, no charge.
One full day,
Thank you.
no charge.
One full work day.
So that's based on my experience because I'm using it right now.
Right.
Same setup.
Okay.
Cool. Wonderful.
That makes sense. So again, applications come into play when we talk about the battery. But as Mr. Raymond mentioned, if you're only using it for a work setup, it lasts one full workday, an 8-hour shift rather. Hopefully it's just an 8-hour shift for most of us. We have a follow-up here from Ron Barbaza, by the way. He asked about the P16s's nano SIM slot earlier. So ThinkPad P16s's nano SIM slot will be LTE, 5G, or both?
It's going to be none because of the regulation for the Philippine government. Some of the features like the nano SIM card will not be available as of now. But we're working on it to have it certified. But I think the gigahertz frequency, the frequency issue, that's the thing with the Philippine government. So it's something that most laptops or manufacturer for laptop cannot get a hand on.
Yeah, just to add, it's similar to some of these regulation issues are similar to what some tablets have as well. All right, in many countries, it's not a hardware limitation. It's just something we got to get through regulatory, which is something beyond this.
Exactly. Yep. But that's work in progress, as mentioned by Mr. Raymond, as they're working to be certified. It's something that is beyond the team right now, but they're working on it, rest assured. Okay. By the way, this is so helpful. Mr. Harveen also listed the I/O ports in the chat if you want to check that out. I'm sure you have documents as well to know more about the features, but that's also in the chat room right now. Once again, ask away if you still have more questions. We want to hear from you. So many good questions so far. We have our technical experts here ready to fire away and answer with the details. Now, I mentioned earlier, Mr. Edward, I said, I want to get my hands on the P16s, and you said you got to order it. So walk us through, well, for the team, not just Mr. Edward, walk us through your thinking when introducing a new product into the market. Let's focus on the Philippine market as well. What are the steps you normally take, and what does each step involve?
I think the better person to answer that, Jamie, is really Ferdy, our 4P, because he's responsible for the product placement and ordering and certification. So perhaps Ferdy can help out.
Sir Ferdy, I'm so happy to finally have you on screen. Is it okay for you to take that question for the team?
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. So again, steps that we are working on is definitely making sure that these new products would be available also in the country. So as mentioned, as this geared towards our existing customer who wants a powerful machine. Example for the P16s, it's powerful enough for the use of the likes of our educational institutions, our manufacturing, and SMEs. And then for the Ultra, definitely, we are also looking for customers that we are aware that we have customers that have small offices and they want machine that's powerful enough. And again, it's a space saver one, and power saving at the same time. So these are the things that we're looking at when we launch our product. We that suits the customers' needs.
Okay. And Sir Ferdy, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this question at this point, but is this already available in the Philippines right now, or is there a timeline that we can keep in mind?
Yeah, actually, it's already available. Yeah, actually, it's already available. We have lots of customers already who ordered the P16s and the P60 Ultra, just to mention.
Great. That's really good to know, Sir Ferdy, and thank you once again for taking that question on. Now, Mr. Raymond, I'm going to ask you to be ready for this question once again and to join us on the screen. You mentioned that you're using the predecessor of the ThinkPad P16s. So what sets this lineup of products apart from their predecessor models?
Of course, number one is speed, right? The speed of my previous or this machine, the one that I'm currently using is only at 2933 megahertz on the memory speed, right? Then I'm using an older version of a processor together with the GPU. Now, with Lenovo's advancement on the P16s, we already adopt the 12th gen processor coming from Intel, which is much more faster together with the physical core and the e-core features coming from Intel. Aside from that is faster memory configuration, okay, under 48 or 4800 megahertz. And lastly, a newer version of the GPU, which is much more, let's say, powerful compared to the one that I'm using. So NVIDIA came up with the T550 GPU model recently, and they adopted it in our P16s model.
Okay. Such powerful devices, indeed. Now, as we think about the hybrid work setup and these offerings, the features that these two devices have, what new problems are you, the Lenovo team, trying to solve with these new product offerings? So what are the main problems in mind that we're trying to address, especially in terms of the hybrid work setup? Yes, Mr. Harvey?
So let me just take this, right? Please jump in, Edward and Raymond. I think the key thing we want to do is to increase productivity it's productivity, making life easier for our customers and our end users, right? First thing is by incorporating the latest and greatest tech from our partners, right? Like Intel, for example. we are able to accelerate time in which it takes to complete a task. So it gives people more time back for themselves, right? If you just go back like 10 years and run a similar app, right, it would take you like, I've seen this happening before, right? Guys would work, click on compile, have lunch and come back, it would still be compiling, right? So,
Yes.
and then while compiling, you have a blue screen and then you do it all over again, right? So trying to solve issues like that, right? Making things faster. But with speed, we also need reliability as well, right? Innovation. Some of the new tech we have, like when you walk away, it locks itself for security purposes. So these are some of the issues we're trying to address, and I think hybrid workplace kind of coincided nicely with that. I mean, hybrid workplace was just forced upon us the last 2 years, right?
Exactly.
And then just bang, all this tech that you've been using, all this, I think key tenets of Lenovo actually came into play, right? With this, that's my answer for this. Anyone else, please feel free to jump in.
Based on experience, okay, just like what Harvin said, I'm not a graphic user, and yet I'm using a workstation. Why? Because I'm doing large office work. So the reports that I'm creating on a daily basis, the pivot tables that I run. So the virtual and the physical memory that I have on my P series laptop helps me speed up my task. Okay? And at the same time, the GPU power gives me additional boost. So ever since I use P series, I don't have any blue screen issue, or my unit will overheat, because all of our P series laptop comes with a dual thermal. So people who run multiple Excel tables or multiple macro tables, especially if they run it on a laptop, they can see or they can hear the fan throttling a lot. So ever since I use a laptop under P series, I don't have that issue. So it gives me additional power, additional confidence that my data and my work is secure, and whatever file or whatever items that I've created will be saved securely.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Harvin and Mr. Raymond, for taking that question. That wraps up our Q&A session, by the way. And what a great question to end it with, because it highlights what these two devices offer once again. In a nutshell, Lenovo continues to make life easier, and it offers the latest and greatest, as you said, Mr. Harvin. The features are amazing, and these devices are mobile, and also they ensure that you are able to maximize your time, speed, reliability, innovation. And again, we'll go back to that line, smarter technology for all, so you can work smarter for the work that matters. So thank you once again, Mr. Edward, Mr. Harvin, Mr. Raymond, and Mr. Ferdy, for taking on these questions. Great questions and great answers. Can we give them a virtual round of applause? I don't know if you can do that in the chat, but please feel the love. Thank you once again for answering these questions.